shit.
That's what I'm talking about.
Wait.
Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Welcome to AI Arms Race, Leading Without Losing, a special 5-part pulse check series from Enrollify. I'm Dr. Scott Cline, a 20-year higher education executive turned consultant. In this series, we'll be going behind closed doors to hear the real conversations happening within higher education admissions and high school leaders. We'll explore how AI is already being reshaping admissions and why few want to be the first to admit that they're using it, for fear of triggering an arms race. Together, we'll ask, how can you bring what's already happening into the open without feeling the very competition we're trying to avoid? Today, I'm joined by Emily Thayer Owens, a college access strategist who has been on both sides of the desk and in between doing persistence work, and is also a speaker and advocate with almost 2 decades of experience in admissions, counseling, and postsecondary success. Emily specializes in human-centered programs that bridge the gap between intentions and impact, whether it's integrating AI with ethical frameworks into student support, shaping inclusive education practices, or advising on direct admissions policy. Her leadership roles on executive boards of organizations like MNAC and MACAC, along with her various speaking engagements and her involvement in the Minnesota AI tech industry, have positioned her with a strong voice on how institutions can meet the moment with authenticity and innovation. Welcome, Emily, to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
It's great to have you on. Just jumping into our first question here, how do you think high school students and counselors are using AI tools in their college search, their application, and their essay writing process right now?
It really seems to be a mix of tools that they're integrating themselves and then tools that are being kind of pushed out by these different companies that students are participating with. So for instance, SCORE has pushed out AI functionality. And so a student might be using AI and don't fully realize it, but then they also are supplementing with AI platforms that they're familiar with. Kind of similarly, high school counselors seem to be navigating the space the same, right? Schools might have put money towards PD for those counselors and staff in general to get familiar with AI. There might be certain apps or websites that the school district prefers that a counselor is using. But then there also are opportunities for counselors to adopt their own. So building out GPTs, they might be using Midjourney or Sora for marketing aspects. It kind of depends. And it seems like right now it really is a coupling together of whatever tools work best for your practice and what you have access to. I know some of the platforms have a couple free opportunities that you can use, and then there's caps or limits based on usage. And so if a counselor is able to afford or has the budget to buy subscriptions, that's going to open up their opportunity. Same with students. So I think we're really looking at a digital divide that already existed, and it's just getting further exacerbated by not only students and counselors who has access and who doesn't. And that's not just with the AI component, it's computers, internet access. So I think what, higher ed leaders need to be really understanding of is what one high school has access and capabilities of doing is not going to be the same for another high school. And so how can you be a good partner and a community member in addressing that within your, recruitment funnel?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think access, as we've been talking earlier, is going to be a theme about us, and particularly that digital divide. Off the start here, do you think that there's anything that should worry higher ed admissions and institutional leaders, particularly about how high school students and their college counselors are using AI?
I think right off the top of my mind is addressing onboarding for new students coming into the institution. There's a lot of assumptions right now on these high school students being able to use technology at kind of the same level across the board, and that is not the case. One thing we've worked on with my students is emailing functionality. That is something I've talked to a lot of my friends about, and especially in corporate settings, et cetera. They're like, how are we onboarding these new hires? Like, a lot of individuals, millennials grew up with that forward button and it said forward. And so how to forward an email. And now it's not that, it's just an arrow. So unless somebody is telling you and showing you that, you would never know. And I think a lot of colleges that I've worked with, especially in the persistence counseling, assume students either know these things already about technology or it's their responsibility to learn these things. But that's an incredibly large assumption. How do you learn something you don't know you should be doing or need to do, right? And in terms of this AI piece, I'm seeing colleges impacting that onboarding. If they're making AI policies, but they're not actively building in how we're going to teach our incoming first-year students about those AI policies, usages, etc., you're setting your students up for an interesting next couple of years. And also your staff too, because that's additional time that staff are going to have to be coaching and mentoring students in, again, navigating your campus.
Yeah, there's a joke we can make about assumptions that we can't repeat on a family-friendly podcast, without a doubt. But it's also a theme that we've seen in higher ed over and over again, where you have different groups of people coming together from students, staff, and faculty, different generations, different walks of life, and the assumptions are made. And then we particularly hit this AI space, and there's so many assumptions or that people are just not talking about right now. The next question is, do you think high school leaders trust higher ed in the use of AI authentically and transparently in the admissions process?
No, to be honest. Mostly because, right, kind of what we touched on before, a lot of high schools are still grappling with what this looks like for ourselves and are asking lots of questions about ethics and transparency. And so that lens is also being used as we're evaluating higher ed institutions, and we're trying to find good fits for our students. We build these really incredibly deep relationships, and we want to send our students to places that are going to take care of them. We're making promises to families that, hey, we're helping your student have a successful future. So we need to have kind of that buy-in with whatever institutions we are putting in front of our students when we're making those college lists or, career pathway lists, et cetera. And I think many organizations, so in the tech spaces that I've been in, many companies themselves are struggling with AI adoption internally, right? You need to have various partners on campus coming together in an agreed upon way of how we're going to be utilizing this technology. And you have some people who are very against AI. You have some people who are very open to AI, and a lot of people that are kind of in between. So we're seeing these colleges and institutions navigating how are we not only utilizing AI, but how are we protecting student data? How are we telling students to be using AI? And I think many institutions are behind on promoting, hey, these are the certificates of security that we've been getting from the companies that we're using. These are ways that we're promising that we're protecting your security. And if there is a security breach, this is what we as an institution are going to commit to in ensuring your identity maybe is flagged, that we're following it for a year, et cetera. I think that showing that on the front end is really going to stand out for colleges. Another component with that is if your institution says that they are environmentally conscientious, or that is a core value of your institution, also social justice, I would add to that as well. If you're adopting AI and pushing AI, whether you're using it right for the perspective funnel and or even just as an institution, now you are grappling with an identity crisis. High school students are very wary and very astute. I see those types of questions coming out in my conversations with students now. So if you're an institution that says environmental stewardship is a core value, then you need to be actively on the front end showcasing this is what we're doing to offset our usage. This is what we're doing to even maybe help solve some of these environmental concerns by using some of the AI. Maybe it's helping to change research. Maybe it's helping to change policy in the state that they're in. I think there's some really unique ways that colleges could be doing that to, again, help build that transparency and that trust.
Emily, this is great. Are you thinking about this kind of like how high school students have traditionally looked at universities, that there's not one size fits all and it's all about trust and fit? Do you think AI is moving in that direction, or is there like a foundation that needs to be there for all institutions, and that it's going to depend maybe on the type of fit that students are looking for around the usage types of, engagements that go into the curriculum, learning and outcomes maybe?
I do think it's going to be based on the institution. As of now, given the AI technology, as of today,
yes.
Right? That could change in 6 months. It could change in a year. I
Maybe
feel like
next week sometimes.
Yeah. I feel like I always have to give that caveat. But But it does seem like it could be, right, that unique yield piece. If a college says, we are really AI forward, these are the ways we're providing AI subscriptions for you, we're utilizing it in our research, we're having every course include an AI assignment, so that way you are becoming really well knowledge in this. That's one kind of extreme. On the flip side, I know that there's conversations and there's institutions that really want to make technology access limited. They want students to have human conversations, debates, really work on that critical thinking. I've even seen some colleges proposing like classes where you only are allowed to use paper and pencil because they want a certain outcome, right? And I think colleges are going to have to really look at all of the different options that exist and how you can incorporate AI and incorporate some traditional aspects and figure out what's going to be best for you, and then really own it and advertise that. And again, I think a lot of colleges and institutions are grappling with that now in and of itself. There's different majors that students are looking for. The workforce is changing, so students want to feel prepared for that workforce. And I think this is a perfect time for institutions to really have maybe that reevaluation or kind of revisit some strategic planning and say, okay, things have changed a lot in the last 2 years or so. What can we do in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years in order to really have that longevity we're looking for?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm pulling out those two themes there where you're talking about transparency, true transparency, authenticity, to be able to put that information out there in the world and have more of those conversations and not be so fearful of them in many ways. Yeah. So, you're walking alongside high school students, on a real-time basis every single day working on high school campuses. What are higher ed leaders missing about how AI is already be using? And, some of the themes that we've already talked about, which is around that access and particularly the digital divide and equity that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a quick word from our sponsor. Southeast Missouri State University needed to launch more targeted campaigns faster, yet they were bogged down by manual campaign builds, slow approvals, and vendor overload. With Element 451, they eliminated 5 vendor tools and gained marketing superpowers in one platform. They saw a 13% increase in applications, processed applications within 2 days, and achieved 33 to 35% email open rates. The impact: personalized, automated campaigns running at scale without the drag. Ready to turn your next campaign around in hours, not weeks? Try an agent today at element451.com/agents.
When it comes to the enrollment process, I think the big thing to note is post-pandemic, a lot of students are more willing to do some tech practices that they weren't willing to do previously. So I have students that are more willing to do Zoom meetings now, whereas before it was very much, no, I want to meet in person. And now it seems like a nice mix. But with that limit, right? If there's too many digital aspects in their life, they get really burnt out. It makes it hard to kind of do scheduling, et cetera. And a lot of times with high school students and also in the persistence counseling I've seen, when a student has an issue or concern, they want it addressed right away. That is a big thing with younger generations. And I almost feel like I should maybe pause.
I'm still as anxious, and I'm a millennial, so, and I want those solutions right away too.
Right. And again, I think it comes back to, again, they're very astute and they're very conscientious about how their time is being used and how they can be most efficient with that time. So if they have a concern or a situation, they want it resolved pretty quickly. And so having, your admission office be easily accessible to answer questions, have consistent messaging with that. I see that is, in my practice, something that gets flagged a lot. I'm not necessarily always getting the same messaging from institutions, depending on the methodology that we're reaching out to answer a student's question. Students are going to be using, either apps. Their phone is the most easily accessible thing that they're taking around with them. And they're getting pushed a lot of technology all at once. So I do see a lot of fear of missing out. and feeling like I need to be paying attention to my phone because I'm going to potentially miss a world event, or I'm going to miss that email from a professor. I might not respond to that email, but at least I saw in the subject line whether I needed to answer it right away or not. And so I think if higher ed institutions can be really mindful of that, how are we actively engaging with these students in these tech spaces, and not being too hands-on, but also being in front of them enough where they remember us and are thinking about us as we're navigating them through the funnel. And then that just continues on once they're at those institutions, right? Students want to feel seen and heard, and utilizing technology is a way of doing that, but you have to be really mindful. If a student wants to see a counselor for a mental health reason, and they're not able to see a counselor and they're pushed to maybe a telehealth thing and it doesn't meet their needs, that's going to decrease satisfaction. And then that's potentially being advertised or broadcast out, and that's going to impact the student's network and how that institution is viewed. So it really multifaceted.
Yeah. You're on the high school leadership side, on the campus side. What do you need, from college admissions officers? You got a good audience right here on this podcast. What are you needing right now to build more trust in this era that we are with AI and AI agents?
Disclosing when AI is being used. And if anybody is following some of the legal regulations that are coming out right now, Colorado passed a pretty extensive one. There's a lot of conversation going around the EU regulations. Colleges, legally might now need to start paying attention to what they're required to put in front of prospective students if they're engaging in a cross-borders recruitment. So some of that involves any time AI is being used to influence a decision. That needs to be disclosed and actively throughout the process. Colorado's AI laws also flag needing to check for discrimination and bias consistently. And actually, if a system is found to express bias or discrimination, it has to be filed with the Attorney General of the state every single time there's an instance of that. So it is so much to keep track of as a high school counselor. And it is a lot for high school students, especially students who have never been through this process and don't have regular individuals that can navigate through day to day what they should be watching for. Because again, a lot of these deadlines don't necessarily coincide with each other. We have FAFSA, we have CSS profile. You now are adding in these financial components that, yes, are part of the application process, but students don't necessarily see that. They see them as these one-off components or pieces that just adds to their to-do list of things that need to be accomplished. Also during their senior year, where they're trying to usually finish really rigorous courses, or spend time with their friends, or be involved for the last time before they graduate. So if we can work actively together to maybe get back to that simplification, that would be huge. Again, institutions are going to stand out if they're able to do it in a way where they're getting the information that they need from students, but are making the buy-in process more enjoyable, because right now it is usually not enjoyable for high school students.
Exactly. I did my entire doctorate dissertation on proving that if you make the financial aid process simpler, you get more students to actually complete the process. Go figure. As we wrap up this podcast, rapid fire here, I love asking the what worries you most, but then also we'll end on the high note of what makes you hopeful in the future. But first, what's worrying you most right now on your mind?
For me, what I'm seeing is there are a lot of changes when it comes to the workforce and options for students, and how are we adequately preparing students for said workforce when we are all just trying to keep up with the changes that have happened in the last 6 months. So yes, we as stewards who are navigating educational pathways, pathway planning, career aspirations for these students, I think what worries me most is individuals who are leaders, individuals who are decision makers, really thinking through, how are we going to make these pipelines for students accessible, something that the students can actively participate in that's interesting to them and ties with, again, all of these core needs that we have as humans. I'm seeing a lot of debates in the tech industry about innovation versus regulation. And that is something that is actively impacting our students. But I think institutions, again, need to be at those tables. That's one of the reasons why I've joined a lot of the kind of tech conversations in the Twin Cities here in Minnesota, because somebody needs to be speaking up for our students. And the more people we can get involved in okay, what does this look like? Yes, I think innovation has its place. And I also think there's a regulation component, and how can we find that marriage between the both of them in a way that helps us grow and create positive change in the world, and also empowers our students to then be stewards later on as they come out of these institutions and are looking to, have their own family, have a house, exist in the world one way or another, right? Like whatever their goals and whatever their views of success are, how are we providing those pathways for them?
I think you're starting to hint at this, but is that where you're on to your hopeful future, or is there a particular thing you want to touch on?
I am hopeful for that. I have 2 kids, and I have to believe in a positive future for them. And if there's things that I can be doing in helping share information, teach people about AI, because I think that's a big component. That's one of the things I've talked about with higher education individuals is, if you're a leader, you need to be learning hands-on this AI stuff in quotations. Because if you're making decisions about it, you need to at least have some baseline of how they're functioning, tokenization, what's an API, how are these workflow automations being built, especially if you're buying contracts with different companies that are selling you this AI product. You need to have an understanding so is this actually worthwhile? Are we going to get end results that we're being promised? And you can ask critical questions along the way. We bought this contract with this company. It promised these things. It's now doing these things for us. You have that ability to measure, not only for your staff, but for your students. So I am hopeful. And I think the more we can, again, communicate and talk about these things in shared spaces, support one another, it's only just going to make us more successful in the end.
Yeah, I think the themes of all these conversations around this space is not being so fearful that you don't all know the answers, but then still being able to engage with the conversations because it's moving so quickly. The world is moving quickly, but particularly in this space. And how do we have, informed conversations, but also not so fearful that if we're opening our mouths and having those conversations that we're going to be like, oh, we don't know all the answers at the same time. So this has been wonderful. Emily, how can people find you if they want to talk more about this?
They can find me on LinkedIn. Please feel free to message me. That's probably the easiest way of getting a hold of me. I will say I am somebody who unfortunately knows too much about technology and data mining, and so I'm not that active on social media, besides LinkedIn for a professional standpoint, partially because that's a choice that we've made as a family, which is, again, an interesting choice. That could be a whole other conversation for this. But right now, email and LinkedIn is probably the easiest.
That's perfect, Emily. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for all the insights to particularly higher ed leaders that are going to be listening to this podcast, and looking forward to future conversations.
The Higher Ed Pulse is part of the Enrollify Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our show helps higher ed marketers and admission pros find their next big idea and features a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Brian Gross, Eddie Francis, Jenny Lee Fowler, and so many of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.